Sri Lanka's new president takes office, promising change. Beijing says a hacker group operating under Taiwanese authorities has repeatedly launched cyber attacks on the mainland, Hong Kong, and Macau. And the latest seasonal influenza vaccination program begins on Thursday. Hello, I'm Melissa Hekalea, and this is TVB News. In Sri Lanka, Marxist leader Anura Kumara Dissanayake was sworn in today as the country's new president after an election that saw voters reject an old guard accused of leading the country into an economic crisis. Just before the swearing-in, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena resigned, clearing the way for Dissanayake to appoint a new prime minister and cabinet. Tracy Furness has more.
Dissanayake greets religious leaders in the presidential secretariat and is then sworn in as the new president before the Chief Justice. In a speech, he admitted turning the country around is going to be a challenge. Politics in our country should be cleaner. People of our country widely expect a better political culture, and we are ready to commit ourselves to that, he said. Dissanayake won just under 6 million votes, followed by opposition leader Sajith Premadasa with just over 4.5 million votes. Given no party secured the necessary 50% of the votes needed to win outright, the Election Commission counted the second and third preferences of the two leading candidates for the first time in the country's history. The 55-year-old new president ran as head of the Marxist-leaning National People's Power, or MPP, coalition, defeating Premadasa and 36 other candidates. The MPP is mainly made up of academics, civil society movements, artists, lawyers and students. Dissanayake became popular among the country's youth with his pro-working class and anti-political elite campaigning. This secured him victory over opposition leader Premadasa and incumbent Liberal President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who took over the country 2 years ago after its economy hit rock bottom. Dissanayake's MPP coalition is led by the Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna, or People's Liberation Front, a Marxist party that waged two unsuccessful armed insurrections in the 1970s and 80s to capture power through socialist revolution. After its defeat, the JVP entered democratic politics in 1994 and has been mostly in opposition since then, but has supported previous presidents and has been briefly part of governments. Saturday's election was crucial as the country seeks to recover from its worst economic crisis, which resulted in upheaval. Dissanayake's first major challenge will be to act on his campaign promise to ease the austerity measures imposed by his predecessor, Wickremesinghe, under the terms of a $2.9 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. Wickremesinghe has warned that any move to alter the basics of the agreement could delay the release of a fourth tranche of nearly $3 billion. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Israel is carrying out extensive airstrikes across Lebanon, with the health ministry in Beirut saying at least 50 people have been killed. Israeli forces are targeting Hezbollah after over 100 rockets were launched at Israel. More missiles have been fired since Israel began the air assault. Both have exchanged fire frequently during the last year, but this is an escalation. David Garrett reports.
This is the evidence that Israel has hit several Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. Smoke rising into the sky in multiple locations after over 100 strikes. The areas of Jabal al-Rafi, Deir Zarani, Jabal Safi and Kafr Moran all encountered explosions as Israel fired across the length and breadth of Lebanon.
Following indications that Hezbollah was preparing to fire towards Israeli territory, we began striking terrorist targets throughout Lebanon. The Hezbollah terrorist organization has been continuously launching attacks on Israeli civilians and has no plans to stop.
The Israeli military told Lebanese families for the first time this year to move out of harm's way. Mobile messages told people to stay away from Hezbollah targets. Defence Minister Yoav Gallant briefed officials, with Israel appearing to put itself on standby for full-scale war. Israelis have been told to anticipate further retaliation from Hezbollah. Israel struck Beirut last week, assassinating Hezbollah commanders. Thousands were at funerals in the south suburbs of the Lebanese capital. Hezbollah's deputy leader spoke there, saying it is now an open-ended battle. Dozens of civilians were also killed in Friday's Israeli strike on 2 apartments. Chanting crowds carried the dead aloft through the streets. These coffins were adorned with the Lebanese flag. As the mourners paid tribute to the dead, anger grew. One said Israel disobeys international conventions, ruling by the law of the jungle. Others simply called them cowards. David Garrett, TVB News.
The Ministry of State Security says a hacker group operating under Taiwanese authorities has repeatedly launched cyber attacks on the mainland, Hong Kong, and Macau. Mainland authorities believe they have uncovered the identities of 3 of the group's members in their investigation. Taiwan has denied the accusation, calling the People's Liberation Army the destabilizing force in the region. Timothy Lee reports.
The Ministry of State Security says on an online post that a hacking group known as Anonymous 64 has repeatedly launched cyber attacks on the mainland, Hong Kong, and Macau since earlier this year. The group allegedly attempted to illegally upload and broadcast content denigrating the nation's political system and policies on websites, outdoor screens, and internet TV services. The central government says it has already taken measures to eliminate such negative influences. The mainland noted that further investigations revealed the hacking group operated under the Taiwanese military's cyber warfare wing. The Ministry of State Security says the Taiwanese Cyber Warfare Wing was established in June 2017 and serves as the Taiwanese authorities' main source of cyber attacks against the mainland. The hacker group was said to have made several social media posts since June last year about cyber attack targets on the mainland, including news organizations and universities, in an attempt to portray the mainland's cybersecurity system as weak. But the Ministry of State Security later found that many of the websites that Anonymous 64 claimed to have accessed were either fake or photoshopped. Mainland authorities also announced that they have uncovered the identities of 3 members of the hacking group and published their names and photos. Beijing reiterated its warning that any attempt of Taiwan independence is doomed to fail. Meanwhile, malware analyst Anthony Lai stressed similar cyber attacks occur in Hong Kong on a daily basis, but noted many local organizations lack awareness. He called for a fundamental change in attitude towards the problem and emphasized the need to create new systems of cybersecurity. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Chinese University of Hong Kong has sent an email to its staff and student body confirming Professor Dennis Loh, the Associate Dean of the university's Faculty of Medicine, as the sole candidate for the university's next president. The CUHK Council will hold a meeting on Friday to discuss the matter. Sources say the 61-year-old Loh will meet separately with members of the student and staff body, the CUHK Alumni Association, and the University Council on Thursday afternoon. The university email noted that Loh is a world-renowned scholar who has received international academic honors. Current CUHK President Rocky Tuan, who tendered his resignation earlier this year, will officially step down in January. The latest seasonal influenza vaccination program is set to begin this Thursday, during which the quadrivalent inactivated influenza vaccines used against the influenza A and B viruses will be available. The hospital authority expects a surge in cases and has urged residents to get vaccinated as soon as possible. Timothy Lee reports.
With the peak of the winter flu season just around the corner, residents could take advantage of the newest seasonal influenza vaccination program starting this Thursday. The quadrivalent inactivated influenza vaccines used against the influenza A, H1, and H2, as well as B viruses will be available. Individuals qualifying for the vaccination program include those aged 50 or above, and those who are pregnant or suffering from chronic illnesses. They can receive the vaccine free of charge at public healthcare facilities and designated private clinics. Prior bookings are not required. Children aged between 6 months and 2 years could get vaccinated via maternal and child health centers. Online appointments are available starting today at 9 a.m. This, as some 16 new district health centers will provide the service. The Department of Health will also arrange for free vaccinations for students in schools involved in the vaccination program. Currently, close to 80% of kindergartens and childcare centers and more than 90% of primary and 75% of secondary schools have arranged for their students to be vaccinated. The hospital authority expects a surge in flu cases as temperatures around the city gradually drop, but remains uncertain when the peak of the flu season will start. Some health specialists said previous influenza seasonal peaks lasted for up to 7 months and urged the elderly, children, and those suffering from chronic illnesses to get vaccinated as soon as possible. Meanwhile, some clinics providing the vaccination service still require an additional vaccine fee of up to $500 and a consultation fee of over $1,000. A number of family doctors said many clinics have to take such measures as they are not subsidized by the government. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Still ahead, world leaders adopt a pact for the future to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Laos is boosting its tourism trade as one of the ways to strengthen its economy. And poly researchers develop a cooling coating for buildings. Welcome back to TVB News. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched a 2-day climate-themed summit for the future on Sunday as part of the UN General Assembly. It came after the General Assembly approved a blueprint aiming to foster greater global cooperation in various areas. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The UN General Assembly has approved a blueprint to bring the world's increasingly divided nations together to tackle 21st century challenges. Those range from climate change and artificial intelligence to escalating conflicts and increasing inequality and poverty. The pact was adopted at the opening of the 2-day Summit of the Future called by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
We are here to bring multilateralism back from the brink. I called for this summit to consider deep reforms to make global institutions more legitimate, fair and effective based on the values of the UN Charter. I called for this summit because 21st century challenges require 21st century solutions, frameworks that are networked and inclusive and that draw on the expertise of all of humanity. I called for this summit because our world is heading off the rails and we need tough decisions to get back on track.
Guterres said the pact commits world leaders to reform the 15-member Security Council to make it more reflective of today's world and address the historical injustice against Africa, which has no permanent seat, as well as to address the underrepresentation of the Asia-Pacific region and Latin America. The UN Secretary-General said the pact represents the first agreed multilateral support for nuclear disarmament in more than a decade. He stated the pact commits leaders to establish an independent international scientific panel in the UN to promote scientific understanding of artificial intelligence and includes measures to mount an immediate and coordinated response to complex shocks, including pandemics. The UN Climate Summit continues today with speeches from China, India and the United States. This comes as world leaders grapple with an urgent challenge on the climate agenda. There are just 2 months left until the UN's COP29 climate summit in Baku, Azerbaijan, leaving little time for agreeing on a new global finance target. Dan Rell, TV News.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is leading Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump in 2 separate opinion polls. This as Harris challenges Trump again to a second debate. An NBC News poll released Sunday puts Harris leading Trump by 5 percentage points as respondents come to see her more favorably since she emerged as the Democratic candidate for president. 48% of 1,000 registered voters surveyed said it was positive compared to 32% in July. A CBS News poll also found Harris leading Trump by 4 percentage points, 52 to 48% among likely voters, with a margin of error of 2%. Asked about Trump, 40% of those polled said they viewed him positively compared to 38% in July. And Harris yet again challenged Trump to a second debate before the election in November. Volodymyr Zelensky personally thanked U.S. factory workers making ammunition for Ukraine as he visited a plant in Pennsylvania. Tight security around the plant in Scranton. The Ukrainian president stopping off on his way to the UN General Assembly. People, hearing Zelensky was visiting, stood outside with Ukrainian flags. Inside, Zelensky addressed workers making the artillery shells Ukraine needs. Ukraine's leader said, "Thank you, but we need more," as he hopes to shore up U.S. support for Ukraine this week. Zelensky plans to speak with U.S. President Joe Biden and presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to lay out his victory plan for the war with Russia. Laos has been boosting its tourism trade as one of the ways to strengthen its economy. With enhanced transportation infrastructure and abundant natural resources, agritourism is emerging as a promising avenue. Sakura Ip reports from Vientiane, Laos.
This is the Blue Lagoon in Van Vienne, an hour's journey from the capital Vientiane after the opening of the China-Laos high-speed railway in 2020. Tourists pour in. Some are eager to explore the rural areas by renting four-wheel drive vehicles.
It feels definitely less touristy than, say, we've just come from Thailand, for example. But in a way that kind of makes the experience of being here a bit more authentic.
The nature, the scenery, I think that's what makes it stand out from other countries that we've been to in Asia so far. We've done some amazing hiking, just really...
The wildlife is
amazing wildlife, like insects.
There were more than 1.1 million foreign tourists who visited Laos this year. The Lao government aims to host at least 4.6 million foreign tourists this year, generating an estimated revenue of $1.3 billion. Tourism can be the solution to the economic challenges that Laos is facing. According to World Bank data, tourism currently accounts for 5% of Laos' GDP. With proper support and development, this figure could potentially go up to 10% in future. One of the key players in Laos tourism, Liu Tinghua, the executive president of the Yunnan Laos Business Association, pointed out that Laos has strong potential to develop agritourism with abundant natural resources. Showcasing the daily lives of Lao farmers, such as rice planting, can attract young travelers and families. Alongside the new Laos-China Railway, business delegations from China's Yunnan province have also been flocking to Laos in search of opportunities. Sakura, TVB News, Vientiane.
The Hong Kong Polytechnic University has developed an environmentally friendly cooling coating for roofs and walls that can reduce temperatures by up to 25 degrees Celsius. It can also lower indoor temperatures by 2 to 3 degrees. Timothy Lee has our story.
A research team from PolyU's Department of Building Environment and Energy Engineering has developed a cooling coating for buildings that can make automatic cooling adjustments. The technology consists of the use of carbon dots, which could make temperature adjustments in reaction to solar exposure. The cooling materials, unlike their traditional passive counterparts, can convert solar energy into light energy. That means the cooling coating's solar reflectance enhances in accordance with the intensity of the sun, which prevents buildings from absorbing excessive heat. This material could be applied on a building's roof and walls. Earlier tests have shown that the coating reduced the building's surface temperature by up to 25 degrees Celsius during noon on a summer's day. Indoor temperatures could even be lowered by 2 to 3 degrees.
The novelty of our project is we just absorb the UV lights and convert it into visible lights to improve the visual comfort Because if your reflectance is 98%, it's with the light pollution, so it's uncomfort. At night, maybe we don't expect too much cooling to prevent overcooling problem. So that's the strength.
The research team said the coating was applied to the roofs of container warehouses at a construction site over the past 2.5 years under a joint Poly-U government project. The results showed that the coated roofs were 24 degrees cooler than concrete roofs and could save 10% of annual air conditioning energy.
This solar-driven adaptive radiative cooling coating developed by the Poly-U research team is unique for its groundbreaking use of eco-friendly polymers embedded with nano-sized carbon dots. That means rare earth metals typically used in such technology is completely absent. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. See you then.